This is the Business Storytelling Show with Christoph Trapp. Name a top 20 storytelling podcast and a top 5% podcast globally. Christoph chats with thought leaders and experts to share tips and tricks that can help you tell your company's stories better to drive business results. Available wherever you listen to podcasts, live streamed on major social media channels, and part of the DB&A television network. Available on most U.S. television sets and streaming on Roku and Amazon Fire. Here's Christoph with today's episode. Let's go.
Let's go, business storytellers. How's everyone doing? Hey, today we want to talk about the halo effect. And what that means is I brought in an expert, a fractional CMO, Erin Blaskie. She's going to talk to us about that. But my understanding is we should connect with the people that can help us, build our networks, give us credibility. Why do you guys think I quote all these awesome marketers on my show, right? I'm using their credibility to build my own. I think that's what she's talking about. We'll ask. But hey, I don't just do it because I want to build my own credibility, but I also do it because they have good stuff to share. So let's find out if Erin is willing to take me under her wing or her halo. Ha, ha, ha. Had to get that one in there. And let's learn about the halo effect. Erin, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Did you like my wordplay? That's the marketer.
I honestly loved it. In fact, I'm probably going to steal that for future copy. So if you see it on anything I do, please just let me use it.
You can use it. It's not trademarked or anything. But anyway.
Amazing.
So tell us about the halo effect. What is it? Why is it important? And what should people do with it?
Yeah. So honestly, you kind of hit the nail on the head at the beginning, talking a little bit about how you're even using the halo effect. But essentially what it is so let me provide a little bit of context first. So I work with a ton of startups and scale-ups. Typically, the startups don't have much of a marketing team, if any. And the thing that they're always lacking is budget. So they don't have a lot of resource, they don't have a lot of budget, and they're often trying to compete against these much larger companies. So whether you have a service-based business or a product company, you're going to have competition. It's fierce out there. And oftentimes when these brands are first starting out, they haven't yet built up enough trust or credibility in the market in order to just go out to the market on their own and, see the results that they're hoping for. And so one of the things that I've always done when I've joined a startup or a scale up and I have these limitations in place, lack of resource, lack of budget, is I've looked around, I've looked around me, I've looked into like the networks that exist around this specific business. And I've asked myself the question, how can I leverage other people's brand credibility, what they've already built up, the authority that they have, maybe some of their thought leadership. Like, how can I take some of that and pull it into the business that I'm working with in an effort to get to those customers a little bit faster, or potentially get more visibility, or even just have that trust and credibility a bit faster. So this has looked. I'm sure we'll dive into all the different ways that you can do this. This has looked a lot of different ways for a lot of different companies. Like I said, you hit the nail on the head. A podcast is one of those things that is a great way to leverage a halo effect. Essentially, you're pulling in these thought leaders. They typically already have a brand. They typically have a network, and you're just basically leveraging the capital that they've already built, while also bringing a lot of value to your community as well. So it's not just about, as you said, it's not just about leveraging the brand for the sake of it, but you actually are bringing in a lot of value that you maybe can't create or produce all on your own, right? That's hard.
I mean, that's how I do it, but I can tell you, I'm certain there's people out there who don't do that, who would just want to talk to people because they want to harness their brand or whatever. Now, maybe I'm just getting too old and too pessimistic in my old age. But so tell me about I mean, there's a difference when you bring somebody in, right? And you're trying to work with them and they work with everybody. I mean, it's like, so let's just go with like way on the top here. Patrick Mahomes, State Farm Insurance. If you don't, I think it's State Farm, right? So if all of a sudden he does Geico, I mean, do people can't you have to draw the line, right? So if some expert gives their halo effect to every single person out there, like at what point do people go, yeah, whatever, you endorse and you work with everybody, like doesn't mean jack?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. And I think that actually there's equal responsibility for that on both sides, right? There's equal responsibility from the spokesperson, if you will, or the influencer, if you want to use that word as well. And there's equal responsibility from the brand. So if I think back to the brands that I've, worked on building, especially leveraging this approach, what I've done is I've looked into the space. I've looked into I'll use the last company I was at as an example. So they were a meeting productivity tool or a meeting management tool. Essentially, you could do collaborative meeting agendas on their platform, and the primary target market that they served was typically managers or leaders of teams. And so what I would do is, instead of just going to anyone, right? Anyone who was willing to share their name or lend their sort of their halo to us as a brand, I really looked into the market to say, well, who are the managers and leaders that have a following, that have that sort of established thought leadership in the area that my customers are also going to care about? And then, I went after those people specifically. So I think when you're doing that from the brand perspective, you really need to make sure there's alignment. I think just, pulling in influencers or pulling in people, who have a bit of clout for the sake of it is not necessarily the most effective thing. You also want to make sure that the network they have is the network you're trying, or it's the audience that you're trying to, reach yourself. And so if I was to just use, let's say a fashion influencer for that same business, I may not have as much success as if I went after someone who's already serving managers and leaders with their own community. So that's kind of the responsibility on the brand side. I think as the spokesperson, influencer, person with the network, whatever you want to call them, the person who's built their brand, on that side, that's a whole other conversation. And unfortunately, we can't always control what those people do or who they lend their name out to. I do think, though, that if there are those people, who are doing that, they are absolutely cannibalizing their own personal brand. Essentially, it would be no different than as a parenting influencer if I was working with Huggies and Pampers at the same time, right? I'm going to lose a little bit of credibility to my own audience because I look then like I'm selling out to everyone versus really being aligned with products I love and use. So I think it's, again, responsibility on both sides has to be there.
So what's interesting about, I was just thinking about that. So I do a lot of Amazon Lives and I do a lot of Amazon Live product videos now, honestly.
Yep.
And I will review anything, quite frankly. You know what I mean? And I've worked with different manufacturers of Wi-Fi extenders. And what's interesting, I do agree with what you said in concept. I really, really do. And for the most part, but maybe Amazon is just different because on Amazon, I review anything. If somebody wants to send me their Wi-Fi extender, I'll check it. But see, it's not guaranteed that I will endorse it, right?
Exactly.
What's guaranteed is that I will try it and that I will say, here's what worked, here's what didn't work. And by now, just to stick with the topic of Wi-Fi extenders, I've used so many. I like to think I kind of know what the industry standard is. And when it's off that, I'll say, well, this one is hard to use because of whatever, or this, I like this about this one. So I guess that's a little bit of a different model, but ultimately they're not talking to me because they don't want to reach my audience. They're talking to me because they want me to talk positively about them.
Yeah, I think, and reviews are such an interesting space, and obviously such it has its own strategy as well. Reviews are interesting. I think you can review multiple products as a person, as an influencer or someone who has that sort of authority or credibility, so long as the reviews are honest, right? To your point, you're always honest with them. I think that's like sort of checkbox number one. I would say checkbox number two is that, I think where people lose credibility in the market on the, being, again, we'll call it the rented halo. If you are that person, you lose credibility in the market if you're going out to the market and saying that every Wi-Fi extender is the best on the market. If you started saying that, then your credibility around that's particular space is going to erode very quickly. So I think, you review lots for sure, but I think it's where you place that sort of flagpole in the ground.
And just a friendly reminder, if you haven't heard me say it before, my friends, if you say we are the premier, the best, the industry leader, whatever, I don't care what it is, I bet you your competitor is saying the same thing.
Absolutely.
So honestly, I would never say the best in any review. Makes sense to me. I don't like those terms, quite frankly. This is the best podcast, Erin, you've ever been on. The end. Right? It's total baloney. Everybody has their own positive and negative things of their shows. So you talk about lack of resources, and of course, here's the reality of things. You tell me if you disagree, but I've worked with teams of 0.25 people all the way up to 80 people on a marketing team. And guess what? Nobody ever has enough resources. Everybody always says they could use more, right? So it's like, that's not a race anybody can win.
Marketing is honestly a sinkhole. At the end of the day, there's so much we can do. There's so many channels, there's so many tactics, there's so many, avenues to explore, and we just can't get it all done, effectively. Or, effectively, sure, like maybe at a larger team size, but even then, it's still a bottomless pit. And so I think what I've always tried to do, especially with those, really early companies that I'm working with that really are the ultimate in resource strapped on both sides of the fence, is I've always brought them back to the goals they're trying to achieve. And I'll use an example just because I like examples to make things feel a bit more concrete. So I was working with a startup company that was in the e-com / kind of retail space. And they had a platform and they were trying to reach these really big brands. Obviously as a startup, if you can land a big brand as a customer, it's a huge win. And it usually leads to more of the same sort of sales. It just sometimes takes the one to be able to then convince everyone else. And so they wanted to really reach this, this set of customers. And so we identified 2 to 3 customers that they could probably go after. But they didn't have a sales team, and they also didn't really have any credibility in the market yet. So they knew that even if they did go out with a sales pitch, it would probably fall flat. And so I gave them the idea, instead of going the sales route, I said, why don't we actually take a much more kind of marketing / this halo effect kind of route? And why don't we reach out to the brands that you want as customers? And instead of, pitching your product, instead of talking about you, let's put them as the hero in this, sort of journey, in this story. And instead, let's ask if they want to be interviewed for your blog. And so we went out to them, we, pitched this idea of interviewing them for our e-com and retail blog. We positioned it as, that we really thought that they had a lot of expertise, which they did. This wasn't a lie. We did our research, we did our homework, looked them up on LinkedIn, made sure that they were posting regularly about this subject. And we went after them, and we were actually able to use that approach to land a top executive at Roots Canada, which is a Canadian clothing brand. So we got this top executive at Roots Canada to give this interview. And keep in mind, this is a brand new startup. The entire team was maybe 5 people, across every department, not marketing. And they did have a marketing student intern for the summer that I was working closely with. And so she actually got the person on the phone. She did this whole interview piece, asked them questions about where they thought the future of retail was going, challenges that, they might have had maybe at Roots. And then we published that as a blog post. So first and foremost, it was great because from a content perspective, it cost us really nothing except time, to be able to get that piece of content. But when we shared it out on social and with all of our community, and then they shared it with their community and their networks, it had so much more effect, overall than it ever would have if we had published a blog post, let's say, on our own thoughts of the future of retail and e-commerce. And so just that simple process of going through, those steps, again, generated this piece of content. But I have even better news because it actually led to a sales conversation. So after the person shared the blog post on their own social feeds, it got shared enough by, the company that it landed on the radar of one of their business development people. And they actually reached out and said, hey, your platform's actually kind of interesting, great interview with like our colleague. Can we set up a call? And so they set up that call and they landed the business, and they have since used this exact approach to land, I think, at least from a very public perspective that I can, glean on my own. They've done this at least 5 to 6 times, where they've been able to land a client by coming in a much more passive way, and again had that benefit of being exposed to all of these other, retail and e-commerce people through the channels of the folks that were interviewed. So just like a brilliant strategy, super easy with 0 resources or budget.
Well, it's not super easy because you still have to do a show and talk about it, but it's a lot easier, in my opinion, too, than, just chasing people nonstop and, as some people like to say, hunt them, right? Which I'm not a huge fan of that verbiage, quite frankly. So I think James Carberry, Sweetfish Media, the B2B podcast people, I don't know if they were the first ones who shared this concept, but they kind of introduced that to at least me. Right.
Mm-hmm.
You interview people on your podcast that you want to work with. It's not truly the model I use. I mean, honestly, this show is now being distributed so far and wide. I'm really just looking for the good content, right?
Yeah.
Is it a good fit? What can we do? What can we talk about? So where's that? So I'll say this up front, my friends.
Mm-hmm.
I really am sorry. I'm going to admit this to you guys. But if I can do a podcast and the content stinks, and I sign $100,000 deal, I'm okay with that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you guys are listening. I'm okay with that. Now, if I had a horrible podcast because of this concept and I never sign any deals, like now I'm not winning at all. Now I'm losing. But there is a fine line, right? So if you have people, I mean, you have to get people on your show, whether they're a prospect or not. And if it turns into money every time, maybe nobody cares if the podcast is good and you just count the Benjamins, But like, where's that line? How do you figure out to still grow your audience while you're also, trying to partner with people?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I would say that I actually would try very, very hard to never lower your quality bar. And I know that that's not very possible. I know it's not always possible, but I do think that in order to have that trust and credibility with the market, once things go out, in order to present that person, let's say that interviewee from Roots Canada, in the best light possible, I do think you have to have a super, high quality production. Now, when I say production, I don't always mean a podcast, right? Like it could be even something that you've written and you're publishing on your blog, or maybe it's, something that you're just publishing on social media, or it's like a live stream or whatever it is. Like the medium can differ, but I would say, bite off the piece that that you can deliver on really, really well, because I do think that when you don't have that quality bar in place, I think people's tastes are, are the quality we expect from, all of these mediums that we're consuming. It's gone up a lot. Production value has gone up. What we can do from home has gone up from a technological perspective. And I think, consumers expect more and they expect better. So I would say that if you can, don't lower that quality bar, focus on, producing just high value content. It doesn't always have to produce, a business deal on the other side of it for it to be worthwhile. There's so many other benefits that we could get into with content, right? Like if you do a podcast and then you transcribe it and you put that on your blog and you share it on social, now there's a brand awareness element to that that's really great. And again, like the networking side. So there's lots of benefits. Not every single episode or blog post or whatever needs to have an ROI attached. But I do think it should always be high quality.
So do what Erin said. Don't do what I just said. Forget anything. We'll edit that out. What's interesting too about the quality. So since, most every show I do is live streamed, So there's very little. It does come back to, can the guest have a conversation? Do they know what they're talking about, right?
Yes.
So that stuff is super, super important anymore when it comes to these shows. So at the end of the day, there was a podcast. They said they don't publish 20 or 25% of the shows they record.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking that's not even an option for me, because we're live, I guess I couldn't publish the podcast, but at the end of the day, the live stream and the TV and everything together, right? That's where people watch everything. So it's one piece of everything. It's not everything how it used to be.
Yeah. So, was it the Unmistakable Creative podcast that said that? Because I read that on like the host's LinkedIn, that they're ruthless. Like if the content doesn't meet their, the top kind of quality bar that they've set, they'll literally throw it out. It doesn't matter who it is. Like it could be like, best-selling, like New York Times best-selling author, and they'll still throw it out if the interview's bad.
It's everybody, right? Sometimes people struggle with, what they want to do. So I love certain collaborations. I'll give you an example. People reach out to me and they say, Christoph, we got a question. We might quote you in this article. Like Content Marketing Institute does this all the time. It takes me 5 minutes at most, right? Super effective, and they use it in like 8 articles or whatever. Other people do that, right? And it's like I like that. It's efficient. Then I got other people who say, could you record a 20-minute video to whatever? And I'm like, no. Could you write a 500-word answer to no? So like I got my rules, right? On what I do for free, when I participate. And you know what? Honestly, those rules apply to anybody. Like I don't even look, whether it's a big company or a small company. If they send me a question, it's easy to answer. I just answer it. The end. How do companies get started? I mean, is that one way to do it? Or how do you even reach out and, get those connections?
Yeah. And I love that you brought that up, because I couldn't agree with you more. I think that brands that are making these asks of people, that are looking to bring in these folks that have a network, you have to make the ask easy. You have to make it super simple for them to say yes to. And some of the things you just pointed out are actually tactics that I've used as well. So the quick, what's your one sort of, short answer to this one question? And then you ask that question of 20 to 25 people, let's say, and now you actually have a pretty lengthy blog post with all these individuals that you can tag on social without any one person having to do a lot of work. That's also why I like the interview approach. So I like, getting someone on the phone and simply just saying 20, 30 minutes of your time max. And even if you don't have that, let's do it in 10 or 15. Like we can be flexible here, but getting them on the phone and just having them answer questions, record that, and you do the work later. Like you don't, like they don't have to do any of that work. The easier you can make it, the more likely it is that they'll say yes. But I've used that approach a lot. I think brands need to, in terms of getting started with this, you need to know your market. So you need to know your audience really, really well. What do they want? What are they trying to learn? What problems are they faced with that you could potentially help them solve? And that'll be sort of your first clues in terms of the content focus that you should, sort of choose to start. And then from there, you need to go out into the market and look to see like who's already talking about these things. So, in the case of the company that I was just at, the meeting agenda, tool, if I recognize that those individuals, the managers and the leaders that we were targeting, if I recognize that they needed content about one-on-one meetings, let's just say, then I can now go into the market and look to see who else is already talking about one-on-ones, who is an established expert in this. And it makes the ask now that much more relevant. And so then the next step I need to take from there, though, is I need to really look and assess, their own social profiles, their public networks. And the reason I want to assess that is not every single person that, is, let's say, in a specific role already, or maybe they work at a specific company, they're not all going to be sharing content that is on point to the thing that you're hoping that they share content about. They sometimes might only be on social, for example, for very personal reasons, and therefore the alignment may not be there. So you want to assess that. And then from there, figure out, what is the ask? What's that very simple ask that you can go out to them with that they're much more likely to say yes to? Because Christoph, I'm the same as you. I have all the same rules, right? If someone emails me and it's a book, they're getting a response in like 3 weeks from now. I can't. I don't have time. But if someone sends me literally like a quick, like, hey, this is the problem I'm faced with. This is a solution I'm thinking about. What are your thoughts? I'm going to respond to that much more quickly. Or, we're compiling a blog post on top marketing podcasts. Which ones would you recommend? Again, quick and easy to respond to. So think about the ask and then just go for it. That's my final piece of advice. Honestly, I think so many people hesitate to ask, especially big names, people with really big networks, CEOs, et cetera. They just hesitate to ask. And I've asked people for things, like that I had no business asking for, and they have said yes if I've made it really, really easy and showed them where the value is for them as well.
And the problem is you don't necessarily know the rules that people go by. I'll give you an example.
Yes.
Seth Godin was on the show. I had no idea what Seth's rules were, right? For how he decides to go on podcasts. Somebody else said later, you have to have 100 episodes. Well, how do you get to 100 episodes? Easy breezy, right? You have to keep publishing episodes. Like that's how you get there. So in the last 30, I know the time always flies. So much fantastic content, Erin. Tell me again, why would people reach out to you? How do they reach out to you? What are the services you offer?
Yeah, for sure. So right now I am a fractional CMO. So I work with a very small number of companies at a time, essentially helping them both establish their marketing teams, establish their marketing processes and their strategies, and then getting all of those off the ground. Typically, I'm also training their team members so that they can kind of step in and take over. And sometimes I work with them on an ongoing basis. I also work with a lot of accelerators and incubators, and I love that work because I get to work as an entrepreneur in residence or an operator in residence. In terms of where you can find me, I'm really easy to find. Literally just Google my name, and I'm on every social platform under the sun, including TikTok, which is new this year for me.
I am not on TikTok, but I'm not on TikTok, but I'm getting into Instagram Reels. Erin, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. It was great to see you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
That's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. Please rate and review our show on your favorite podcast channels. And don't forget to share this episode with your networks. We appreciate you. Until next time, let the best stories win.